Welcome everyone to the Minnesota WIC Participant-Centered Webinar Series. My name is Karen. I'll be facilitating the webinar today. So during this webinar series, we've been sharing ideas and best practices for providing participant-centered WIC services. Services that participants value and that keep them coming back. So joining me today is my colleague Marcus. He'll be doing the behind-the-scenes work of monitoring the phone lines and making sure things run smoothly. So we'll get on to the plan for the day. Today we're going to talk about communication over the phone. It seems like a simple topic. Why even have a webinar? We all know how to talk on the phone. We all do it every day. But it is a very important topic, especially in the service industry where we do make and receive a lot of calls. We want to ask ourselves, are we being as effective as we can over the telephone? Being effective matters. For one thing, if we have things that we need a client to remember, to bring, to do, we want to make sure that we're communicating that message effectively. It makes our job easier. Also, participants judge our customer service in part around how we are on the phone. We want people to feel good about our services, to want to call us, not to dread calling us. We want them to come back, and our customer service impacts that. And the more they come back, the more we can help, the more influence we can have. So today we'll look at effective phone communication, simple tips and strategies to have productive phone conversations with participants. We'll also talk about dealing with difficult people on the telephone. We'll talk about phone policies and also a little bit on the content of our conversations. Not only how we say it, but what we say as well. We sent out a survey prior to this webinar. We asked you to describe challenging situations you encounter when talking on the telephone. There were 3 prominent themes that came out from the responses. Those were language issues, rude or angry people, and background noise or distraction with driving, with kids, all those possible distractors. Here are some responses from the survey around challenging conversations. When someone is upset and they keep talking and you can't explain yourself or the situation. Hard to understand due to accent or poor connection or background noise. When clients get upset when they lose their vouchers and you can't replace them. Cell phone reception is bad. Our phones are hard to hear on. Loud background noise. Language barriers. We use language line over the phone, and sometimes we wait a while, so sometimes calls can take a while. So some can be impacted by us, some of these things, and some we can deal with and some we can't. But many of them can be impacted by our tone, our style on the phone, what we say, and how we say it. First, we'll talk about effective strategies when talking over the phone. Just like in person, communication skills over the phone is something we can continually work at. We can always get better. Here are some suggestions from the survey around tips for effective phone communication. We received many great tips. Listen carefully to clients and write down any important information to refer back for clarification and remember the conversation. I let them vent out their frustration and show sympathy towards it. Speak politely, calm voice, friendly. Trying to return calls as soon as possible. Being pleasant, saying thank you to families, scheduling appointments. Allow the participant to talk and express themselves. Be very polite, be friendly. And here's some more. Speak clearly, don't mumble. Be clear and concise. Re-explain things if you feel the client is not understanding. Be friendly, respectful, and courteous. Ask clients to write down important things they need to bring with or when their appointment is. Speaking slowly, short questions or phrases. If you're not sure, repeat what the client has said. Have a friendly voice. So great suggestions for communicating over the telephone. And I would like to go into a couple of these in more detail. One person on the survey wrote, I can't see their body language, so I can only go by what they're saying. And one study of effective communication determined that body language accounts for 55% of communication, tone of voice was 38%, and spoken word was only 7%. So on the telephone it's difficult because body language is taken away from you. Another study that looked at communication on the telephone with the elimination of body language said that 84% of our message is with tone of voice. So we really have to be careful over the phone that our message is communicated in the way we want. We want to use the tools at our disposal for the things we can control. I'm sure that many of you have heard that you should smile when you talk on the phone because people can hear it. Well, that is true. It's been studied. Many studies have been done to prove that we can hear a smile over the phone. Smiling impacts how we speak. Not only that, but studies have been done to show that listeners can actually identify different types of smiles based on sound alone. That's amazing. And since much of our message over the phone is our tone of voice, making sure that smiling tone comes through is important. They even have a name for a true, real smile. It's the Duchenne Smile, and it's named after the famous scientist who first studied it. Here's an example. So the main difference is the addition of the eyes in the smile. So there's a difference between a mouth corners only smile and one that involves the eyes. You can see on the picture on the right. And people can actually tell the difference when someone has a Duchenne smile when they're talking on the telephone. Here's another example where you can see that eye involvement. Having a smile come through on the phone, what it does is it reduces people's anxiety. It makes them more comfortable, and they'll be more likely to mimic you and smile as well. Think about our role at WIC. Many people might not feel comfortable calling us. They're calling and they're asking for help. They might have anxiety. They might have fear of the unknown. They might fear a government program. And we can help reduce that anxiety with our tone and with our smile. We have that power. Another benefit of smiling, it helps us. Smiling makes us physically happier. Smiling stimulates more positive emotions in us. When you smile, there's this positive feedback loop that goes into our brains and reinforces that feeling of joy. Studies have shown that smiling reduces stress and helps generate more positive emotions. Smiling leads to decreases in stress-induced hormones that negatively affect your physical and mental health. Maybe that's why we often feel happier around children. They smile more, on average hundreds of times a day, where adults smile much less. And they've studied reportedly happy people, and they smile more than other people. So good reasons to smile more. So when you're thinking of picking up the phone, think smile and dial. A few things you can do to overcome that lack of body language over the telephone. You could tell them your name. It could be disorienting for a participant if they don't know who they're speaking with. Hello, this is Karen with the WIC program. How can I help you today? Adopt a positive tone, a bright, cheerful tone. And this will say, you don't need to feel guarded. You can trust me. We're not like other public programs you might have had negative experiences with. We welcome you here at WIC. An enthusiastic, attentive tone can help the participant feel comfortable and can actually change their mood. Participants can move from that guarded, wary mood to an open and trusting mood just with your tone. Speak clearly. Try to pronounce your words well. The other person doesn't have the help of seeing your face. Try to avoid mumbling or speaking quickly. We said sometimes the other person is the one who's difficult to understand. They might have other distractions going on and they're speaking quickly. Now, we don't have control over this, but if we speak clearly and enunciate our words, the participant might unconsciously mimic our speech pattern and slow down and enunciate as well. If you're one of the many of us that use filler words a lot, this is something to watch for. These are little words like or like, or yeah, or you know. These are distracting over the phone, and they can make it harder for people to understand your message. Filler words are difficult to train yourself out of, but it can be done. The first step is just to notice it. Notice when you're doing it. You could tape yourself. I haven't done that, but what I've done is try to make myself more aware when I hear myself say, I notice it more now. And noticing something consciously means you have more control over it. Another strategy when you feel the need to say it is pause. Pause rather than saying like. And this has the added benefit of making you sound more confident, more thoughtful as well. Slowing down your rate of speech can also help. We often say words like, or because we're talking fast, and our brains need the chance to catch up with us. So slowing down can help. It takes a while, but you'll see a gradual change and hear it happening less. We want to avoid WIC speak when we can, our words. For example, when it's a new person on the phone, I might not use a term like certification. I might say the appointment to get you enrolled on the program or signed up, or another term that's easier to understand. Sometimes you'll adjust your language to fit the listener. You may not speak the same to a grandmother as you do to a teenager. A few more strategies. You can write things down, important points to cover before making the call so you don't miss them. I do this all the time because when I get on the phone and get talking, my short-term memory might fail me. And my list always helps me remember those key points. Eating, drinking, chewing gum, these are pretty self-explanatory. These can be heard over the phone. Using their name helps build connection, build that rapport, which is harder to do over the phone than it is in person. You can jot down their initials to help you remember their name. You don't have to overuse their name, but use it naturally. Include it in the conversation. Most people don't mind if you ask them how to pronounce their name. They don't take offense. I'd rather have someone do that than mispronounce my name. When finishing the conversation, we want to make sure they're satisfied. You could ask, is there anything else I could help you with? Say, have a nice day, or it was nice talking with you, or thanks for calling. Sometimes you can transform what might have been a negative call when they first started to a positive experience for them. And ending on this positive note, it will change their view of us and perhaps their mood when they call us again. We have that power. Remember from our webinar on dealing with upset people that we do have power. We have the power to impact other people's emotions and reactions, and we can use that power for good. This is my pet peeve, and we all have them, is when someone leaves a telephone number and they leave it so quickly, they say, call me back at 202-579-8448. And the only way for me to get that is to go back and listen to it again. Sometimes I have to listen to it several times, and it takes time and builds my frustration. So I like to think about my writing pace when I leave the message. Sometimes I write it down at the same time I'm saying it. So area code 202-579-8448. So just some simple strategies to improve our effectiveness over the phone. So this is one of our challenging situations over the phone, dealing with people that call and are angry, upset, or difficult. Working with an organization that serves the public, you will run into this. And how you respond to it impacts their reaction and your inner peace and emotional well-being. Here are some of the challenges noted on the survey. When people are agitated or irritated, clients find it easier to be rude when on the phone versus in person. Rude clients, not understanding they may need to wait a couple weeks to be rescheduled if they miss an appointment or not have an appointment that day for them. Families getting angry when they can't get an appointment for exact date and exact time they want. Here are some of your great suggestions for dealing with difficult people. Do your best to find out what exactly they are upset about and come up with a solution. Stay calm. Don't raise your voice. Listen to them. Acknowledge their frustration that WIC can be a difficult program to navigate. Focus on what you can do for them and not what you can't or cannot. And I like this one because it's admitting that WIC can be a difficult program to navigate. And we forget that sometimes because we know WIC so well now. But remember, when we first started with WIC, it took a long time to learn all the rules. I remain calm, attempt to better understand their concern by utilizing open-ended questions. Sympathize with them. I explain to them I understand their frustration and will try to help them resolve the problem. Great suggestions here. Some key themes from the survey responses for dealing with difficult people were listening, staying calm or controlling the emotion, and apologizing. These are simple yet really powerful tools. So first we'll talk about listening. We said on a previous webinar that sometimes people are difficult or angry because there's an unmet emotional need. They might feel misunderstood, disrespected, powerless. They might feel a loss of control or a loss of self-esteem. And these can manifest themselves as anger. And when people are feeling angry or frustrated, their biggest need is to feel heard, to feel understood. And this can often fill that emotional need. By listening fully to people's concerns, we let them know that they're important and that their concerns are important. Sometimes our first inclination when faced with anger or resistance is to jump in and solve the problem. And it's important to let people express themselves before searching for a solution. It's difficult to do sometimes, to listen to people vent, but just by getting it out and being heard, even if you can't solve their issue, sometimes it's okay. Being heard was the main point, being understood. And so here are some comments from the survey around listening. Try to diffuse and make them heard. Repeat back to them what they said. Listen and empathize. Let them speak and express themselves. Reflect and affirm their feelings. Ask how you can make it better. One effective technique in communication we know is mirroring the other person's speech style, their rate of speech, their volume, their pitch. It makes people feel more comfortable. It's that theory of familiarity and similarity. But this is one instance where we do not want to mirror the participant. When they're angry and lashing out, we don't want to mirror that back to them. But this is difficult to do when they're lashing out at you. Difficult people often cause us to change our emotions, and then we change our behavior. We get defensive. We get angry. It is a natural human response. And although it's natural, this defensive reaction can hurt that situation. For one thing, when we change how we're interacting with that participant, we're giving up our power to shift that person's mood, to change the situation. And we don't want to give up that power. Another thing is that when we get angry, it hurts us. The reaction produces stress in our bodies. Our bodies release chemicals. And if it happens a lot, it can be bad for our health, our hearts, our circulatory, and our immune systems. So for these reasons, one communication technique that sounds simple, yet is profoundly difficult sometimes, is to control that emotion. And it's hard because emotions are faster than thoughts. The emotional response is instantaneous. So you have to make the conscious effort to think before responding to that emotion. You may think to yourself, okay, this person's not mad at me in particular. They're mad at the situation. Maybe there's an emotional need not being met here. Or I represent WIC to them, and that's why they're angry. So most times, feeling the response might be beyond your control. But we can choose how to react to that emotional response. If they're giving you anger, it may stem from fear, confusion, powerlessness. It might have nothing to do with you. And so this is, again, something we can work on. We can cultivate this our entire lives. We'll always have the opportunity to practice here in many of our life situations. So here are some comments from the survey around controlling emotion. Staying calm myself by speaking calmly and slowly to the participant to allow myself time to think about what or how to respond before I say anything. Ask open-ended questions, no judgment. Take their word for it. Just ask questions to clarify concern or issue. Stay calm. Be as helpful as possible. Try to state the facts and not react emotionally. Several people wrote apologizing as a strategy for dealing with upset or difficult people over the telephone. Again, very powerful. This skill is a little easier to cultivate. This is a major way to diffuse anger. People often expect anger to be met with defensiveness. An apology often subconsciously takes people by surprise. A person in anger might feel disrespected or a loss of control, and apologizing helps dissipate that anger, helps them feel respected and in control. You could also use apologizing to prevent anger or negative reaction on the telephone. If you put them on hold, when you take them off, you could start with, I apologize for that delay. How could I help you? It goes a long way. Or if you're delayed returning someone's phone call, you could lead with that apology. Or if someone said when they got to you on the telephone, oh, it took me forever to get through to someone, or finally I get to a real person. Even though you might not have control over the phone system your agency uses, you can still make a small overture of apologizing. I'm sorry for that difficulty. How can I help you? So let's do a poll question. On the survey, people wrote that people calling who miss their appointment and need to be seen right away might get angry or upset when they have to wait for an appointment. So let's pretend that this person has called and reported that they missed their appointment and you can't get them in until next week, and they're angry with you and they lash out. Maybe they say, next week? Are you crazy? I need my benefits right now. I missed my appointment because we just moved and I didn't get a reminder call. That's not my fault. Are you trying to starve my children? So lashing out. What could be a response to that? So I'm going to give you some options. I'll read them and then we can vote. So some options could be, I'm sorry for the delay. We do our best to get people appointments as soon as possible. Or, you do have an option. You can keep the appointment next week, and if you have time, you can come to the agency sooner than that. And if someone misses their appointment, we could fit you in, although we can't guarantee anything. Coming first thing in the morning can often increase your odds of being seen. Would that be an option for you? Or, I'm sorry, currently that is our next available appointment. Could I offer you some referral information for food pantries and other resources in your area to help until that time? Or, moving can be challenging and stressful. I'm sorry about that missed reminder call. Or maybe you'll have another one that you'd like to share. So go ahead and vote now. And if you'd like to type a message in the chat box, go ahead and do that. Great, I'll go ahead and close these so we can see. They're coming in. So it looks like the winner so far is the third response. I'm sorry, currently that is our next available appointment. Could I offer you some referral information for food pantries and other resources in your area to help until that time? So what this person is realizing that their anger might stem from that fear of not having enough food, from food insecurity. And so they're offering a statement that will help with that underlying fear. There was a comment that said, I'd use a combination of different responses, and that's often the best way. So I'm going to go back and share to Sharon. Another challenge with communicating over the telephone that was mentioned on the survey was communicating with participants with limited English. And this will always be a challenge for us. Our participants come from many cultures and speak many languages. So here are some comments from the survey. Sometimes language is a barrier over the phone. When participants have a strong accent or broken English, it can be really hard to understand them. Although this is a challenge, there are some strategies to help when speaking with participants with limited English on the telephone. If the person is on the other end speaks a different language from your own, you want to speak slowly and as clearly as possible. You want to try to keep your words simple. Keep your sentences short. Think about the words that you choose. So instead of the word utilize, could you use the word use? Or instead of the word positive, you could use good. Or instead of increase, could you say less? Increase, you could say more, or less for decrease. So choosing short, simple words that people might understand. The English language is tough. There's a lot of rules with pronunciation, and many words sound similar. For example, you might say, I want to help you. And they might hear, I won't help you. So very similar, just an example. Take pauses so you can allow for pauses. If a person's translating in their head, they might need a minute to catch up or process before they respond. Repeat information. That helps people. Avoid acronyms. Every WIC program has acronyms. WIC itself is an acronym, and they're all different. When I used to work at WIC, we had an appointment called a PP&I. It stood for a postpartum and infant certification. But if a participant called and I would say, are you calling about a PP&I? They would say, what? So I might say, that first appointment after having the baby, and use that instead. You might say 2 o'clock in the afternoon instead of 2 p.m. So avoiding those acronyms. You also want to avoid metaphors or idioms in the language. If you say, I need to run that by my supervisor, they might think you're going to go run. Or if you said, we can kill 2 birds with 1 stone, people might not know what that means. So being as simple as you can. All right, I want to switch gears a little bit here and talk about our policies and procedures, the how of how we communicate over the telephone with people. Most agencies have rules, whether they're formal or informal, about communicating over the telephone. Who takes the calls and when, procedures for when people leave a message, who returns the call, and when they need to return it. What's important is to look at your phone systems and look at your policies around phone objectively and say, do any improvements need to be made, or is everything working just fine? And you can do this as a group at your office. So why is it important to look at our phone policies and procedures and our efficiency? Because it's part of our overall customer service. It impacts the participant's overall opinion of our professionalism and our level of service. It impacts how they react when they do come into the office. When I'm at my worst socially is when I've been in a complicated phone queue that takes forever. And maybe I've been routed to the wrong place because I pressed the wrong button, or I've been disconnected a couple of times. And by the time I do get through, often that poor person on the other end bears the brunt of my wrath. So how effective our systems are for telephone communication will impact how open and interactive participants are when they do arrive at WIC, that overall opinion of WIC. It also impacts how likely people are to keep up with the WIC program, whether they decide WIC is worth it. So it impacts our ability to influence their lives. And this might be an area where WIC sometimes struggle. I often have to call WIC agencies and WIC sites, and I often have challenges getting through, leaving messages, getting a call back. And I know some of it has to do with staffing and funding as well. I've said as part of my job, I do WIC assessments where we go to different sites, we watch appointments, we talk to staff, we talk to participants, We try to ascertain program strengths and weaknesses. Well, one thing we do is we talk to participants about customer service. We ask them, what's important to you about customer service? And what things impact that experience? And phone systems and getting through on the phone, it's often mentioned as a challenge. I went to my notes on my last assessment that I did in another state, and right off the bat found 3 comments. Here they are. Getting them to answer the phone is hard. They keep you on hold too much. When you call, you never get to talk to anyone. Even when you leave a message, it takes a couple of days. Besides the phone, I'd give them a 10 because they're really nice here. So phone service is what's keeping them from that high rating in customer service. So it's important to step back sometimes and really look at the experience of the participant, and if there's anything that needs to change, and if there are things we can do as an agency to improve the experience of that participant when they do call and reach WIC. On the survey, we asked if there's a formal system in place at your agency for guaranteeing that someone gets a call back within a certain amount of time. And most of you said, there's not a formal system. We just call participants back as soon as possible. And that's great. What I might ask you next is, do you check that? Do you periodically check the timeliness of as soon as possible? What does as soon as possible mean? Is it timely? You do have a way of checking when a message was left. I think most phone systems do that. And then you can see, when did I call the person back? Perhaps you want to agree as a group, what do you mean, what does timely mean? What is good customer service around returning a call? Is it 2 hours? Is it 24 hours? What to you is timely? And then say, are we meeting that definition for ourselves? Are we meeting that standard of consistent, timely responses? And if you aren't, then the next step becomes, is there something we can do about that to improve it? So I'd like to do another poll question here. I want to ask, what's your best guess for your agency? What's the average time it takes a participant to get a call back from the time they leave a message? And I realize it varies from day to day and even within the day, but what's the average? So I'm going to go to the poll and I'll read it for you. So the responses are 1 to 2 hours, 3 to 5 hours, 6 to 8 hours, 1 day, 2 days, I don't know, or other. So go ahead and do that now, and feel free to write in the chat box if you'd like as well. I'll give a minute for this. It looks like a winner is emerging, so I will go ahead and broadcast these results so everyone can see them as they're coming in. It looks like 1 to 2 hours, and that's wonderful. That's a great response rate. I'm going to go back to Sharon. I've talked to some of your regional consultants, and they said that many of you don't have to take incoming calls when you're directly servicing someone in the WIC site. And that's great. That's good service. It's the ideal. I might get upset if you're taking care of me, and then you get a call and you have to take care of them. I might get that signal that I'm not as important as that person on the telephone. But sometimes people might not have a choice. It's part of their job. They might have to take those incoming calls. So what can we do to minimize this and minimize any damage to customer service that might happen? One thing you could do is to just make a short comment before you pick up the call and then right after you hang up. Maybe to start with, you could say, I apologize, I'm on call and I have to pick up incoming calls today. And then when you get off, you could say, I apologize for that interruption. Let's get back to what we're focusing on. You might want to tell them right up front before you start that you'll have to take a call if one comes in. So you're setting that expectation in advance. Another related scenario, what happens when you're already on the telephone and then someone comes up to your desk or someone comes into your office? Can you give them a little sign that says, you're important to me too. I'll be with you in just a moment. If you were on hold, you could use your words and say, I'll be with you shortly. Or could you just hold up a little finger to give them the message, I'll be with you in just a minute, that little signal. And what this does is it just reduces people's anxiety. they can relax. Okay, she's going to be with me as soon as she gets off the phone. I'm in the right place. So little ways of communicating respect when working with phones and phone communication. Has anyone received a random follow-up call on something to see if they were satisfied? Maybe it was from a doctor's office with someone checking in to see if you're feeling okay. A call from a service person to see if your issue's been resolved. They're rare, but if you've ever received one, you can back me up that they're powerful. Sends a powerful message. Wow, she cares, or that agency cares. They took the time to call me. It conveys importance, respect. It makes people feel special. And I realize we can't do this a lot at WIC. We have a lot of time barriers. But can we do it sometimes? Can we do it once in a while? If someone had food insecurity issues, for example, and you recommended several food pantries in the area, can you check in with them and ask how they made out? Or if they were having shopping issues and you gave them a suggestion or a recommendation, can you check in and see if it worked? Maybe for a nutritionist, it's calling to check in after a formula switch. Or for a breastfeeding peer counselor, it might be calling a couple of days after they brought home that new breast pump to see how it's working and if they have any questions. It may take time to do that short little call, but the person receiving that call will remember it for a long, long time. With phone communication, it's important to get feedback. You might think your phone system and policies are fine, but your participants might have a different opinion. And you don't know until you ask. Again, something to talk over at your agency. Maybe this feedback has already been collected in some way and it's just about looking at the data. Maybe it's as simple as doing a short little survey, a one-week survey, where you ask everyone that comes in to answer 2 questions. Maybe it's a half sheet with 2 questions on it. I know that some programs are utilizing technology like tablets and other devices to make surveys quick and easy for people. Maybe one of the questions is, how would you rate us for your ability to get through on the telephone, where 1 is very hard and 10 is very easy? Or you could ask, rate your level of agreement with this statement. I get a return to my phone messages in a reasonable amount of time. Do you rate your level of agreement as agree strongly, agree somewhat, neither agree or disagree, disagree somewhat, or disagree strongly? Whatever your questions are, just 2 or 3 questions, and then look at them. It could be in English and Spanish. It's just a snapshot to tell you, are there any issues there? How are we doing with our phone service? You might find out that everything's A-okay, and that's wonderful. Or you might find out that something needs improvement. But knowledge is power, and it lets you work on anything that needs improvement. I just want to touch a little bit about the content of what we say. The content will depend on why the person's calling or why you're calling them, but a couple things to think about here. One is, what expectations are we setting for new people? Are there some tips that you can give people at the start when they're calling to avoid any hassles later? So maybe in addition to telling them what to bring, maybe you want to set expectations around the length of time that they'll need. That will depend on your agency. What's the average time for a typical certification with wait time included? Setting people up for that expectation, but it's not going to be a 10-minute process. Maybe you want to set expectations around nutrition education. You could decide as a group what that expectation should be. Maybe something like, WIC's a nutrition program, so every time you come, you get to experience some type of nutrition education or discussion around you and your family's eating and health. Sometimes you might meet with a WIC nutrition staff. Sometimes you'll attend a group discussion or do an online class, and they'll explain more about that when you come. Whatever your modes of nutrition education are, you're setting people up for that expectation. And this might prevent the people who say, I'm only here for a pickup. If we set that expectation early on that WIC is a nutrition program. And by setting our expectations, we are preparing people for success. And this is similar to a concept that we talked about on an earlier webinar, and that is setting the agenda when they first get there, and it helps reduce anxiety. This is what's going to happen during your visit. These are the steps we're going to take and why. And so setting these expectations are so important for reducing people's anxiety and setting them up for success. Another thing around content that I see many WIC staff doing successfully is repeating key points from the discussion over the telephone. You're telling them several things during the conversation, and it's easy for people to forget. So repeating key points and then summarizing the conversation at the end will really help them remember. So some simple tips we talked about today for making our phone conversations as good as they can be. So I'd like to offer a time now. If anyone wants to come off mute and share a story or share a suggestion, they can do that now. And I'll give a minute. Okay, it sounds like everyone is all set. So I do want to say thank you for your continued level of participation. We've got a lot of great information on working with people over the telephone. And thank you for responding to those surveys. As we share ideas with each other, we grow and learn and improve our agencies. So I hope you'll join us again in the future for more of these webinars. And thank you and have a great day.